Welcome to all the learners of MWG 001 Theories of Women's and Gender Studies. In this brief program, we will tell you a little bit about what to expect from the content of this particular course. Before we begin, let me start by introducing the panelists for this program. To my right, Dr. Himadri Roy,
Hello.
who is a program coordinator along with me for the PG Diploma in Women's and Gender Studies, of which MWG 001 is the first course. And to my left, Dr. Nilima Srivastava, and she is also a program coordinator for the MA program in Women's and Gender Studies, which we are now developing. I am Anu Aneja. I am a professor in the same School of Gender and Development Studies. Let's begin by talking about a little bit about this course and what you can expect from it. MWG 001 is a foundational course. What this means is that it will introduce you to various foundational theories and concepts in women's and gender studies. You will learn about recent and contemporary theoretical positions and debates. The theories will be set against a historical background of women's and queer movements in India and internationally. It will have a lot of interdisciplinary content, which means that you will be learning about women's and gender studies across various disciplines. So we will look at disciplines such as humanities, which will include, in this case, literature, philosophy, and psychoanalysis. We will also look at theories and debates within the social sciences relating to women's and gender studies. We will look at movements in a historical context, that is the history of women's movements in the West, the history of women's movements in India, and you will be able to link these movements with various feminist theories and debates. Remember that we are looking at theories within a national framework, but always placing it within an international context. So do try to make those connections as you read this material. That is, what do you think is the link between women's studies in India and women's studies in an international framework? It is also going to be an intersectional study. Intersectional means that we will look at gender not in isolation, because gender is never studied in isolation. It is always studied in its relationships with other factors. What are these other factors? The other factors are factors such as caste, class, sexuality, and race. So you will be able to juxtapose women's questions and broader gender issues in the context of caste, class, sexuality, and race, and think about the issues of marginalization along various lines. So as you read the material in this course, and this is also going to be true of all of the other courses that you will be reading in this program, do try to make connections between various forms of marginalization, because this will lead to an in-depth and a greater and deeper understanding of the issues involved. Now let us look at the course structure. In this course, we have 6 blocks. Block 1 will talk about history of movements. Block 2 will talk about women and in movements. Essentially, these 2 blocks will give you an idea of the history of women's movements internationally as well as in India. After this, in block 3, we will talk about queer liberation, alternate sexualities, and the movement of people of alternate sexuality for equal status in society. So do when you read these materials, these particular blocks, do try to make comparisons between the women's movements and the queer liberation movements in India and also internationally. In block 4, we will look at feminist critiques of knowledge. What this means is that all the knowledge that we absorb, how do we look at it from a feminist perspective, and how do we critically analyze it? What can we do to change it, to modify it? Then in block 5, we will look at feminist theories. So here you will be introduced to various feminist theoretical positions and debates. And finally, again, In block 6 we move to queer theory. So again you can make theoretical comparison between feminist theories and queer theories.
Let's talk about the first block, which is history of movements. The first unit is women as question and women in question with reference to the West. Here we will look into the historical context within which the women's movements were born. Then the unit will also look into how the notion evolved as a concept and as a movement. Then the unit deals with plural nature of feminism, that how women world over have different experiences and face realities in a different way, and therefore universal history of feminism is not possible and also not desirable. Next is unit number 2 is women as question and women in question with reference to Indian perspective. Here the unit deals with why women's question is necessary as a social question needing intersectional analysis vis-a-vis caste, class, race and ethnicity. Then the unit looks into histories of women's movement in Indian context. The third unit deals with suffrage. The unit starts with defining suffrage, then moves on to discuss the history of women's suffrage in global context and also as an issue in India, especially between 1927 to 1937. The fourth and the last unit of this block talks about feminisms and its variations. It starts with defining feminism and how the three waves of feminism evolved with the passage of time. Then what are new feminisms and what were the major shifts and turns in the philosophy and ideology of feminism.
In block 2 you will look at women and movements in the Indian context. Primarily we will be confining this material to the 19th and 20th centuries in both the blocks. Firstly because most of the movements happened during this period, and secondly it will give you a framework within which you can look at what was happening in India and what was happening in Western countries and make historical connections between these. In block 2 there are 3 units. Unit 1 is on the peasants and working class, Unit 2 on Dalit and Black feminism, and Unit 3 on ecofeminism. This block primarily will help you to build links between women's movements in India and the struggles of other marginalized groups, specifically the movements of peasants, the working class and Dalits in India. Because as we have said earlier, women's issues cannot be discussed or looked at or examined in isolation. There are very deep connections between these movements and the issues which confront women, the issues which confront peasants, the working class and Dalits, and of course we have women representations in all of these groups, and their issues are going to be slightly different or slightly modified by the fact that they belong to one of these groups. Also, you are encouraged to make a very interesting connection between Dalit feminism in India and Black feminism in the West, to look for similarities as well as differences. You will find interestingly that there are a lot of similarities. In the West we will talk about the issue of race and gender, and in India we talk about the issue of caste and gender. What is the relationship or what are the similarities between race and caste from the perspective of gender? But of course there are wide cultural differences between the West and India. So you will also be able to look at differences between racism and casteism from the perspective of gender when looking at these very different historical and cultural contexts. Finally, the third unit, which is on ecofeminism, talks about some very positive interventions that have been made in the struggle to save our besieged environment. This unit will highlight the role of a specific feminist consciousness, which we term ecofeminism. This is in the context of ecology. That is, what is the connection between how we look at our environment, the earth, our natural resources, and what has been the traditional view on all of these, and how have feminists or feminist theoretical perspectives helped to modify this.
Now, when coming to the third block, in this we have 4 units. The first unit talks about constructing sexualities, the issues constructing sexualities. Now, when we talk about this, in this unit you will come across what are sexual norms. Now, how are these sexual norms fixed in the society? How it has become a tradition to have sexual norms. We'll also see that what are sexual hierarchies regarding sexuality and gender. How are the hierarchies in a society is created. The second unit talks about queer movements in general. Now it will begin, the queer movements means the movement will begin, the unit will begin from the pre-colonial attitudes or the diversified attitudes that we have seen in the colonial period in this country as well as internationally. Then gradually moving the movement to India itself, we will see the post-colonial prejudices and resistances that is happening only in India. In the unit 3, it talks about legal issues, especially focusing on the case studies of section 377. Now section 377, when this unit you will read that what it is exactly about, the description of this 377 and its definition, its history, its effect, when did it begin, and also how did the Delhi High Court's verdict has affected reading down of the section 377. And the last unit of this block 3, queer liberation, is the terminologies and identities. In these terminologies and identities, we will see that what are homosexualities, how does it has impact of the society itself, what exactly it means. We'll talk about cultural essentialism also. In cultural essentialism, we'll see how one culture is dependent on the other culture, how the society moves from one to the other, and how they are interlinked to each other.
After the third block, there is a shift towards theoretical issues. So do try to make connections between the histories and the theories. That is the first half of this course and the second half of this course. In block 4, we move to the block called Feminist Critiques of Knowledge, and this block has 4 units. Unit 1, Natural Science, Unit 2, Social Sciences, Unit 3, Humanities, which includes Literature, Philosophy and Psychoanalysis, and Unit 4, Feminist Readings. So these are pretty self-explanatory. You will be looking at feminist critiques of knowledge in all of these areas, that is in the natural sciences, in the social sciences, in the humanities, and then comparing the readings across these disciplines. Essentially, this block is going to help you critically examine the marginalizations of women's roles and also the marginalization or the effacement of women's contributions in knowledge across various disciplines. You will notice, or perhaps might have noticed already, that when you have read books in school or even in college, very often a masculine perspective may have been depicted, or if there is a woman's perspective or a feminist perspective, it may be an add-on, it may be in the margins, literally, so to speak. Why has this happened historically? This has happened due to patriarchal constructions of knowledge. Of course, we will examine patriarchy also much more in depth in some of the other courses. But here you will learn how the social construction of patriarchy has actually added to the suppression of certain forms of knowledge. What are these forms of knowledge? These are forms of knowledge which may have been either created by women or may have women's perspectives in them. across the disciplines, these perspectives have been perhaps either marginalized or, as I said, effaced or erased or completely done away with. How do we address this problem? That is, we all want to study further in all of these various disciplines or in one or the other of these disciplines. However, we are constantly struggling against this construction of knowledge which is highly skewed away from women. Feminist theorists have done a lot of work in various disciplines. So in each of these units, you will look at how a feminist theoretical perspective helps in decoding the patriarchal the patriarchal construction of knowledge, and also helps in dismantling some of these knowledge systems, and not just dismantling it to destroy it. Our idea is not to destroy but to reconstruct. Reconstruct what? Not just a feminist body of knowledge, but reconstruct a more equitable knowledge in various disciplines, so that women's perspectives are also equally reflected along with male or masculine perspectives. So we will apply critiques of knowledge based on various feminist theories in the natural sciences, in the social sciences, and in the humanities. And in the last unit, Unit 4, Feminist Readings, you will see how feminists have helped to construct alternate models of knowledge. And what do these alternate models of knowledge look like across various disciplines? Then in the next block, we will look more closely at some feminist theories. This block, which is block 5, is titled Feminist Theories, and here you will make connections between block 5 and blocks 1 and 2. Rather, you are encouraged to make connections between block 5 and block 1 and 2. The first unit will look at formative feminism. Here we will talk about various formative feminist theories, which will include liberal, Marxist, socialist, and radical viewpoints or standpoints. These are all foundational ideas which have enthused, which have inspired Western women's movements in their very inception, at their very birth. So we will look at how liberal feminism or Marxist feminism or socialist feminism or radical feminism, for instance, what is it made of and how has it impacted various feminist movements internationally as well as in India. Subsequent theories will also be discussed in this block. These will include post-colonial feminism, feminism and psychoanalysis. In the feminism and psychoanalysis unit, you will look at Freudian psychoanalysis. Some of you may have already heard of Sigmund Freud. If you have not, you will hear about him and what he thought about feminine development, female sexuality, etc. From a feminist perspective, how have feminists reacted to Freudian explanations of the girl child's internal development, women's developments, women's psyche, etc. How have feminists responded to this? How have they responded to his notion of the Oedipus complex? All of these will be discussed in the unit on feminism and psychoanalysis. In the third unit, we will look at post-colonial feminism and third world feminist theories. So here we will talk about feminism in relationship to imperialism and in the historical context of post-colonialism. So you will learn about what colonialism and post-colonialism imply and how is feminism related to these terms. In unit 4, we will talk about feminism and non-normative relationships. You have already would have read about what non-normative means in the block on queer liberation. Here we will again pick up on that thread and talk about relationships which are not normative. And therefore we call them non-normative, and how feminism examines some of the issues around such relationships. And finally, a very important issue which does not get addressed very often but needs to be centralized is the unit on disability and feminism, where we will talk about the exchange between feminism and disability studies, the issues surrounding disabled people and especially disabled women, what are their problems, how are they marginalized, and how can feminist theory help to address their problems.
Now, moving from the feminist theories, we come to queer theory. Now, when we talk about queer theory, there are 3 units. The first unit is called philosophical and psychoanalytical perspectives. The second unit is called literary and cultural perspectives. And the third the last unit is called Indian perspectives. First unit will discuss, as you have seen in block 5 already, that what about Sigmund Freud and feminism. Over here we'll see Sigmund Freud once again talking about sexuality. The second unit will deal with British colonialism. Especially this unit will be focused only on India, where we'll see British colonialism and how the law had section 377, which you have already read in block 3 while doing queer liberation. You'll see that how the section 377 has been impacted, has been formulated, and how did it impact the literatures during that time. Last unit will deal with the Indian perspectives. With the title itself, you must have understood that what are the queer, it will talk about only India, what are the queer concepts that that is only in India available, what are the sexuality rights, their differences and tolerances as well as intolerances, whether they are tolerances or intolerances, this will be questioned, and how identity, sexual identity is being formulated only in the India.
So these were the 6 blocks of MWG 001. This is the course material that you will be receiving. All of these 6 blocks are contained in this one book form, and so that for your convenience, so that you can move back and forth between blocks and units. We would like you to keep making connections, keep reading backwards, forwards, so that you are able to link issues between units, between blocks, and also in your own personal life. Historical connections, of course, we have already touched on this. Historical connections between women's movements in the West, women's movements in India, queer liberation movement in the West and the queer liberation movement in India. Also theoretical overlaps and linkages, patriarchy and feminist critiques, the sex-gender dichotomy. Sex and gender will also be discussed in MWG 002. Issues of caste, class, sexuality, race and body. Link all of these with the issues of women's and gender studies. So these are some of the interlinkages that you need to keep in mind, not only in this course, but also across the various courses of this program.
Here you will have to build connections between courses so that interlinkages are formed. You will be reading, understanding and developing a critical perspective, because the whole idea of going into women's studies is also to develop a critical perspective, because whatever is going on in society has been there, but it has never been looked at with a feminist lens. So our effort will be to build a critical perspective. Then we would also like you to make connections with your daily life happenings or situation which you face or deal with in your daily life, or you see across the society or around you. Then you also need to discuss with your peer, with your counselor and your friends as to how these issues, when looked from a different perspective, mean or take a different shape than what is commonly being understood by the same concepts or same happenings or same incidents that we are exposed to. Let's have a look at CYPs and unit end questions. Check your progress means that you can assess your own understanding, which is inbuilt in the material itself, and see as to how you have understood or imbibed the concept which is being talked about. So it is encouraged that you don't repeat or you don't use the same language, but make an effort to write these exercises in your own words so that you grasp it, and then you can see as to how theory is being applied around you and understand the linkages between what is happening and what is the theoretical understanding. Then next is the unit end questions, which is basically to prepare you for the examinations as to how you will be asked question in exams and how you will be attempting these exams. Again, we have a word of caution for you that please don't copy the language which is being given to you, because that will not help you in understanding what is being given to you as written material, but it will good if you develop your own understanding and write it in your own language. Then we have also provided you with suggested readings which will further help you in getting an in-depth knowledge about what is being talked in the material which is being provided to you.
So we do encourage you to read these suggested readings, add to your knowledge of this course. And finally, if you have any queries or if you have feedback on the course material, we would love to hear from you. You can write to me directly, since I am the course coordinator for this particular course, MWG 001. You can email me at anuaneja@ignou.ac.in, or you can call me at this number 011-2957-1614. We hope you will enjoy the reading material of this course and build connections with all the other courses of this program. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.